Okay. Hello and welcome to the Rails Board meeting. I'm Gwen Gregory, Vice President of the Rails Board, and I call this meeting to order on Friday, November 22nd, 2019 at 1:02 p.m. Stacy, would you please call roll?
Yes. Dave Barry,
Here.
Stu Busenbark, Michael Campbell,
Here.
Haley Cox,
Here.
Selena Gomez Bellows, here. Gwen Gregory,
Here.
Percy Harris,
Here.
Diane Hollister,
Here.
Sarah McCone Chase,
Here.
Paul Mills, Jenna Nemec Luisi,
Here.
Scott Poynton,
Here.
Dee Reynolds, Nadia Sheikh, and Thomas Stagg.
Here.
Great. We will do guest introductions and public comments at the same time. Let's start here with guests in Burr Ridge.
Dan Bostrom, Rails. Jim Krieger, Rails.
Myra D. Rails, Amy De La Fuente, Rails.
Mary Witt Rails.
Deirdre Brennan, Rails.
Mark Hatch, Rails.
Ryan Hubble, Rails.
Back there.
Stacy Palmisano, Rails.
Should be there. Sylvia Norton, American Association of School Librarians. I just realized I'm sitting at your board table and I didn't mean to do that. I just, okay.
Okay, any public comments? All right, let's go to Bolingbrook. Looks kind of dark. No one in Bolingbrook. How about Cole Valley? Nope. East Peoria.
As a point of information,
Yes.
Madam Vice President, the consortia are all having their joint CE day today.
Oh, okay.
So that's where
they're all-
everybody is.
Okay.
And it's a great thing. I believe Cher is there also, the Heartland Consortium. They're all at Joliet Community.
Okay, well, good for them.
Yep.
Illinois State Library.
Greg McCormick.
Karen Egan.
Thank you. Anyone on the phone?
Nope.
Nope.
It's just us.
Okay, great. May I have a motion and second for adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Do I say who said it or do you?
It's
All right,
helpful.
so Sarah moved that and Dave seconded it. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. May I have a motion for approval of the minutes of the October 25th Rails Board meeting?
So moved. I'll second.
So moved by Michael and seconded by Scott. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Next, excuse me, the Open Meetings Act requires boards to review closed session minutes at least semi-annually. It also states in part that a determination shall be made and reported in open session that the need for confidentiality still exists or that the minutes no longer require confidential treatment are available for public inspection. Staff recommends that the closed session minutes for Rails Board meeting of May 24th, 2019 be released as they no longer require confidential treatment. May I have a motion for release of the closed session minutes as presented?
So moved.
So moved by Dave and seconded by Selena. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Now Jim is up with the financial report.
Like to highlight a few items for our events in October 2019. The report is in your board book. Through at October 31st, we had 15.1 million in unassigned general fund cash. That would fund estimated 16.1 months of operations. We did receive a Aryan per capita grant payment of $1,518,756 in early October, which helped our cash position. This was part of our federal funding for the fiscal year 2020. We still have outstanding 3 vouchers of $1,072,500 each $3,217,500 total that are applicable to the fiscal year 2019 award. So we haven't received those yet. Our revenues through October were, general fund were $1,361,778 below budget, entirely from the lower area per capita grant revenues, of which we've only received the federal portion for this year. Our investment income through October is still barely above budget, but declining slightly every month as interest rates have come down. But they're still certainly at high levels compared to prior years. Our expenditures were $302,000 below budget, to mostly from contractual services, some of which we will realize later on, and some because of delayed payments, or not delayed payments, but payments that apply to an earlier month, particularly in delivery. We are above budget on equipment rental and repair and maintenance expenditures as we made some purchases that really pertain to the entire year. A significant purchase though in October was the procurement of a new email filtering system that will provide for enhanced email security. And what is it called? Finecast, okay. And it should be much better than what we had as our Barracuda system. Our personnel expenditures were a little over $74,000 under budget, of which is $58,000 for salary expenditures. We have 3 budgeted open positions, 2 of which have now been filled. There's only 1 position left in East Peoria. That's been a difficult one to fill, a catalog position. There have been, through October, minimal special revenue fund expenditures. We have 2 large projects that are going to start. We're going to start showing some activity. One is the L2, and the contractor has been determined, and the first payment has been made in November. And then the Census 2020 grant program will begin, and we'll probably put in some separate reports on how we're doing with that as we go along. But these are just starting up. And that's pretty much it for the report. We did, over the last month, we've gotten our 2 insurance increases. One is health insurance for next year through Limerick. It's going to go up 5%. And I calculated that would affect rails on an annual basis by, approximately $26,000 on an annual basis. So we can handle that. On our liability and property insurance, if I can find it. Okay. The bad news is on property insurance, because of excess property, because of all the terrible weather conditions and flooding and everything, that portion of our insurance bill went up by 87% for the next year. The quote was higher than that. Now, the good news of that is that was only 1 or 2.8% of our bill last year, and now it's going up to 5%. So that increase was only about $1,700. And so it was very much discussed, but because we hold really minimal property, we don't have a $20 million library or anything like that. It was a small part of our increase, but it's something that is affecting a number of libraries. But overall, our bill from LIRA for liability and property and automobile is only going up $6,719 or 5.8%. And even better, our workers' comp is remaining flat. A small decrease is forecasted, and it increased a little bit because of a higher projected payroll, but our experience modification went down to below 1, which is a good number. 1 is an average, and now we're below average on their claims. So overall, it's a pretty good picture on the insurance for the next year. Can I answer any questions? Thank you. I will move on to the expenditures. And the expenditures listing is at the end of the financial report. The expenditures for the month of October were $1,344,372.96. And are there any questions on the details?
Okay.
Okay.
May I have a motion for approval of the check voucher and register for October 2019?
So moved. Ally?
Second.
So moved by Hallie and seconded by Michael. Stacy, will you please call roll?
Dave Barry,
Yes.
Michael Campbell,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Selena Gomez Bellows,
Yes.
Gwen Gregory,
Yes.
Percy Harris,
Yes.
Diane Hollister, Sarah McCombs Chase,
Yes.
Jenna Nemec Louisi,
Yes.
Scott Pointer,
Yes.
Thomas Stagg.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Now we will move on to reports. Report from the Rails president. Well, Paul Mills is not here, as you can see, and I have no report in his absence. The Rails board committee reports by the committee chairs. The advocacy committee, Michael.
The advocacy committee did meet today, and it was a very good meeting today. Probably one of our best meetings that we've had in a long time. We had a couple of special guests today. We had Carolyn Kinsel from ILS, which is the Illinois School Library Association. She was the interim executive secretary who represented their board for them today. And I'll let Sylvia introduce herself in a moment from ASL, who was also there. So we talked a little bit about school libraries today and about how we could collaborate better within Rails and the school libraries. Within that time, Jenna gave us a nice success story about her and her school and what she's been able to accomplish. As well, we talked about starting several chapters that ILS is doing across the state, and maybe how we could collaborate better across the northern part of the state. So overall, it's a very, very good meeting, and we hope to have other areas like universities and special libraries do the same at other advocacy meetings in the future.
Great, sounds wonderful.
I would just add that Sylvia is going to be talking later to the whole board.
Mhm.
Yes. All right, the consortia committee, Deirdre?
We did not meet,
Okay. The executive committee,
did not meet.
okay. The policy committee did meet. And we are continuing to work on the Rails employee handbook and still hope to have it for the whole board to look at early next year, like March. So you can be waiting for that.
Maybe sooner.
Maybe sooner, maybe sooner. but so early next year in the spring or even before spring. Does March count as spring?
Depends, right?
So also, we may have a vacancy on the policy committee. So if anyone is interested in being on the policy committee in the future, think about it. And you can check with me or
You.
Deirdre and talk to us about it.
That was well choreographed.
Not that you would have to join it right this minute, but I think in the future there will be a vacancy. The Resource Sharing Committee.
They're meeting, I think they're meeting in December.
Okay,
We actually need a board member because, on that, because Jay was on that committee. So we do need a board rep to the Resource Sharing Committee.
okay,
They meet quarterly.
I do resource sharing.
That's perfect.
great.
Okay. I will write
You're
your name
on.
down. Thank you.
The Universal Service
I'll
Committee.
send you the info. They're meeting next Tuesday.
Okay, great. Next, Rails reports. The
Yes.
Rails monthly report, Deirdre.
Thank you. So you have my written report. I do want to say a few more things. We're going to talk about the census a little bit later. We do have an agenda item for the statewide database proposal. These are the first two paragraphs in my report. So I'll hold on those for now. I did want to, starting from the end. So the communications department, in particularly Dan and Mary, and I guess the social media team is perhaps the best way to describe that. They did an analysis of the performance of some of our Facebook ads. And I would recommend that you all read it. It's very interesting. The conclusions that they reached about, which are the last page of the report, conclusions and next steps, the conclusions that they reached about the effect of Facebook and social media on things that we do is very interesting, and we're going to continue to do these kinds of analyses and use them to do things differently or do more of the same. Or is there anything that you would like to say, Dan, about it all? No, you're good. Okay. And then you briefly met Amy De La Fuente, but Amy is our census project manager. Come on up here, Amy. And I thought it would be good if she just gave you a couple of minutes on what she's been up to. I think you've been here officially 3 weeks now, and it feels like you've been here forever, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And so maybe you just want to give a little overview of how it's going. This is a huge project for us, $750,000, very important topic. So we want to keep you all very much in the loop.
So thank you for letting me speak.
Just be sure you speak up because we have
Okay.
these
Great.
microphones. Thank you.
So of course, I'm thrilled to be part of the census work with the Collier counties and specifically the library systems. I just wanted to give a brief update on where we are at with grant implementation. So you probably knew from the previous meeting that the state was a little bit delayed in their rollout. And so we're still seeing that delay trickle down through us. But we have been tasked with focusing on 6 hard to count communities or populations. So those are children between the ages of 0 and 5, older adults, renters, people living at or below the poverty line, people experiencing homelessness, and people who are young and mobile. So we need to make sure that all of our efforts with our subgrantees reflect that work, because at the end of the day, we're accountable to the state on that. So since Rails is a library information system, our primary focus will be working with library systems as the different libraries in 8 Collier counties as our subgrantees. At the moment, we have 19 interested libraries that span 5 counties. In order to participate as a subgrantee, each entity needs to meet eligibility requirements. And of those 14 libraries, or of those 19, 14 have met their eligibility requirements, and I'm currently working with the others so that they can get grant compliant, because we're not able to sign a contract or disperse funds with them so that they can do their census implementation work. In addition to working with libraries, Rails will also be allocating some funding toward 2 social service agencies that span across 6 of our counties. They will be addressing primarily children under the age of 5, people living at or below the poverty level, renters, and older adults. Lastly, we will be working with a few of county level agencies with some of our leftover funding. And again, they have to somehow funnel their energy toward as many of those 6 hard to count populations. On Wednesday of this week, Jim and I, along with Grant, who works in our data department, we attended a regional intermediary training with all the regional intermediaries across the state, got further direction and clarification from the state on different reporting mechanisms. We have a data partner in UIC, and they are still trying to create a platform that will be user-friendly so that we can collect data about what our outreach efforts are looking like, and then be able to spit them back into these wonderful formulas that can create tables and data charts and all these fun pieces of information so that we can see what is the result of our outreach efforts. So like I said before, we're a little bit behind, not through fault of Rails, but it's just the state getting everything going. So we have submitted a few budgets at this point, and I'm in the midst of another budget iteration, and then that will be reviewed by our state assistant. And then once everything gets finalized, we hope to officially sign the contract with the state. Probably, they haven't given us an official deadline, but the way it's looking with the holidays, it sounds like it might be early December. And then the state will make a public announcement about that, or they will publish it. And then after that, we will begin the work of signing individual agreements or contracts with all of our subrecipients so that they're aware of their requirements, and we want to make sure that they can uphold their end of their responsibilities to complete the census work and send in data and that sort of thing. So that's where we're at right now. I'm looking forward to this work. I enjoy being at Rails so far. It does seem like I've been here for a while. That's been the least of my worries of being a new staff person, of fitting in. It's more just trying to deal with the state and them moving the goalposts. But we're gonna settle down pretty soon and get this work going. So I hope at the next meeting in January, I'll have a lot of great information to share. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
What are the eligibility requirements for the various libraries?
So in order to be a subgrantee, the state has requirements. So they need to have something called a sam.gov account. So they're basically registered in the state system to receive funding. They have to complete a programmatic risk assessment, and then something called an ICQ, which is financial risk and management. So those are things that don't take that long to do, and all these entities knew about fulfilling these requirements way back in August, when Rails had several informational meetings talking about applying for the grant, and potential subrecipients listened in on calls and had various email conversations. And so they've had time to complete these, but we know that sometimes somebody starts the work in a library and then the work gets delegated to somebody else. And so maybe sometimes those requirements and the need to do that work be eligible doesn't get passed on. But I'm confident that we'll be able to get that done because we have a lot of phenomenal plans that have been submitted. Libraries especially have been very creative in thinking about how they would do outreach, how they would utilize their existing programming. So that's why I'm really invested in trying to get everybody grant compliant.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. Well, I'll look forward to hearing lots more about it in January.
She's going off to do the budget. As you can tell, in only 3 weeks, she has become incredibly knowledgeable. It is wonderful. I don't know what we would do without her. I believe that constitutes my report. Any questions about anything?
All right, well, we can move on to the service of the month, which this month we're having resource sharing in Illinois Part 2 from Mark Hatch.
Yes, we are. You received part 1 last month from Ann Slaughter about how people find things, essentially, and this is how people get things.
All right. Well, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to stay right over here since I have my computer.
Okay, as long as you
This is
speak
okay.
up, okay?
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Great. Okay, sounds good. I can figure out how to advance the screen. We'll be all right. There we go. Thank you. You'll forward now? Okay, great. Okay, I wanted to just briefly touch on the type of system that we have and how items actually move through our delivery system. We're actually a hybrid system of in-house and outsourced deliveries. We outsource a portion of our work to Continental Transport Solutions. It's a company that has a extremely large facility in Elmhurst, Illinois. The process, I believe, is extremely simple, user-friendly, efficient, and statewide focused. Just some of the stats I wanted to go over briefly. We drive a lot of miles. We drive over a million miles annually. Just last fiscal year, we processed 9 million items. Of those 9 million, CTL, who I like to call, that's Continental Transport Solutions. They've actually processed 4.4 million of that 9 million items. They actually do a ton of stops as well, as you can see. We do cover a lot of miles, 27,000 square miles, and we have a staff of about 50 individuals. Our budget's about $3 million. User-friendly, I think our system is extremely user-friendly because there's not much the library has to do. You know, we have predetermined routes that are designed by our computer system. They're optimized for the most efficient way possible. We also have a ticketing help desk that if a person wants to communicate with us, if they have a problem, if a delivery was late or something of that nature, would just say, Mark is wonderful. You know, they can utilize our ticketing system for that information. So also, we also have our locations that we have quite a few locations under what we call Van on Demand, you know, or VOD. Those locations we don't go to regularly because their volume is extremely small. So what we do is we allow them to actually place tickets in our system, which will then notify us to stop by that location to retrieve their items. We also have another way that we communicate with our libraries. Each one of our routes, we have a route email string associated with every library on the route. So if the route is running late or anything like that, all we have to do is send an email to that route email string, and everyone on that route is notified of the delay, when they should expect us, you know, or what the issue is. Efficient. I think our operation is extremely efficient. Our hubs, I believe, are in great locations to where our members are currently. We also have utilized LASA, which is Laboratory of Applied Spatial Analysis, to vet our routes, to assist with the routes being as optimized as possible. I love working with that group because they definitely think outside of the box. We've had the luxury to implement quite a few of their recommendations, but ultimately save money for the organization. So it's a great group to work for. Another way that we're becoming efficient is we're creating more and more CDPs, or community delivery partnerships. And what that is where a smaller library could actually partner with a larger library that's receiving 5-day-a-week delivery. And in turn, that smaller library is now entitled to 5-day-a-week delivery as well. There are some requirements, the library has to be willing to go to the larger library to retrieve their material, because that's where their material will be delivered to. So it's a great way to take routes out of the streets. It's a great way to take stops off of the street, So I think that is definitely a good product that we've been offering. Also within our warehouse and our sorting facilities, we have like a pod structure. It's like a 10 by 10 L-shaped work area that our sorters actually work in. It reduces the amount of steps that they have to take. It reduces the amount of touches that we actually have to touch with our material. It reduces our workers' comp entries and things of that nature, because they stay focused within that 10-foot radius when they're actually sorting the materials. And we do sort a lot of materials. Statewide focus. We actually meet our sister company, the Heartland Library System, 5 days a week in Champaign, Illinois. So we actually exchange material with that group Monday through Friday. We also are statewide focused by meeting with our delivery coordinators that we have with the state library. We meet with those guys on a regular basis to actually stay focused on what we're doing within the delivery departments. We can exchange information, we can share information, whatever is going on, we can actually share that information. Like I always like to say, delivery is free, other than the fact that it costs the library 4 fine counts a year for 1 week. We're asking that the libraries count the material, their outgoing material that's placed in those blue delivery containers. We need that for a couple of different reasons. We need to share that information, our volume information, with the state library. We also needed to determine our capacity within our vehicles, the total number of FTEs required to get it done. Like I said, it is a time-consuming process because it is a manual process and a physical hand count of the actual items that's inside of each one of those blue containers. But that's only 4 times a year. So we do ask that the libraries do participate in that, because of the fact that those numbers are extremely important. We also created a couple of training videos, to assist with helping the libraries work with our delivery department. We've got videos on preparing the material, how to actually putting the material into the containers, a video on actually the help desk, on how to actually create a ticket within our help desk. We also have a video on the carrier service that we utilize. The carrier service is for the City of Chicago, our special libraries within the City of Chicago. So we also have a video for them, showing them how to populate the online request form. And then also member lookup, which is L2. The last thing, and it's one of the most important things, is the video on how to populate the label. We actually use that 4x4 label. It's so important that people understand how to populate that label. The label is extremely simple. It's just to, for, and from, but believe it or not, sometimes information is missing. So we created a video to help them out to make sure that we get all the information we need. great.
Hey, go back to that for a minute.
Well, this is my favorite. Rails delivery is as good as gold. So thank you for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
So can I answer any questions? Yes.
Have you been able to figure out exactly how much money that the LASSA surveys or that we've saved through using LASSA?
Oh, that's a good question.
That is a really good question. No, we actually haven't looked at it yet, because believe it or not, we're still working with LASSA. We've got multiple things going on right now
But
that
we-
we're hoping.
But we know we've saved at least $100,000
Well, yeah,
annually.
But
So,
that's-
but that's, we can calculate that, what I think so far, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
that is something, but we've
It's a
got
lot.
more things in the works that once everything is out and in the open and we've implemented, I expect we should be able to save a lot more. But right off the bat, I would say yes, 100,000 by eliminating shuttles, combining routes and things of that
Yep.
nature. So overall, I think we have been saving quite a bit of money.
Okay, thank you.
About a year ago, you did that presentation about LASSA in Southern Illinois,
Yes.
and we looked at, so where are we with that as far as eliminating some routes and moving things around? And that's what you were talking about too, right, Dave?
Correct.
Yeah, because that was about a year ago, I believe. And so that was my question. So,
Yeah, we've actually asked them to do a lot more information, a lot more work as well,
Mhm.
to identify, work on a statewide basis at this point now. Because of the fact that what we didn't want to do is just to have work done within Rails. Since we do look at things from a statewide perspective, they're actually looking at it statewide, to actually look and see are our hubs actually in the right place from a statewide perspective versus just from a Rails perspective. So they're working on that. We also have them doing other projects for us as well, because as you know, we're working with a delivery consultant as well on possibly looking at our outsourced versus in-house deliveries, working on that. And then also, are there any other service centers that are prime for outsourcing? And then the third thing is automation. Are there other things that we can implement that's going to save us and gain even more efficiency? So we've got a lot of things in the works right now, so I think, as they continue to, and I'm referring to LASSA, as they continue to complete their investigations and things like that, we'll have more to share.
Is there a timetable set yet for when all this process is going to be over, or how
Can I
close are
answer?
you to that?
Sure.
Can I answer that? So it all started really because of if we were going to change routes in certain ways, it was going to affect the size of the hubs that we needed. You may recall that. And so we're still trying to get to the bottom of that. But it looks like that we should know, I think in January, we'll know, because we have to, if we're going to have to move out of East Peoria, or even if we're going to have to move out of Coal Valley, because Coal Valley is very small. We cannot add routes at all in Coal Valley. You've probably been there, Wait, we've both been there. We've all been there. So, I mean, the first thing we need to do is figure that out, and then we can figure out if we need to move, and then we have to start looking at where we would move, and we have to think about the effect on the staff who might be in those places. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and it does seem like every time we got answers to a certain set of questions, we then realized we needed answers to yet another set of questions. But they're very good. They're very good at turning things around. And they understand that we need to have this information well in advance of July 1st. So if we need to start making changes, we have plenty of time to find space and et cetera. So did I explain that right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Very well, thank you.
but it is amazing. It's like you find out a couple things and it's like, oh, but now we need to know this. It's just, there's so many, it's so complicated, it's.
I have one other question, Mark. So just in terms of general trends, how is the flow, is the amount of delays going up? Is it pretty stable over the past few years? Is it going down? Do you have any trends in that area?
From fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 19, I think we went down about 400,000 items, you know, and I'm not sure if that is from a library perspective or how we actually count, you know, so that's where I'm still trying to get a better understanding of that. And I actually believe it was on how we were counting. I think there was a segment of our work that we were double counting, you know, and so when we switched over to a different process of entering the information in, the libraries were entering the information directly into our computer system. That also helped us to look at those numbers a lot better. So we actually do believe that we may have been counting numbers twice, about a couple of 100,000 items twice. I'm not sure, but I believe that was the case. But as we move on with our next fine count and so forth, I'll definitely have a better understanding of was that the case. But I really believe that the numbers are pretty much staying the same, pretty much even, you know, from what we can tell from processing the work within the hubs. It's just the way we were counting, I think it's just incorrect.
Okay. I know that from iShare Statistics, which is the resource sharing system for academic libraries, it actually has been consistently going down in a number of years.
Yeah, I think there's a general trend of circulation being down, but
Yeah. For sure.
but on
Of
the other
physical
hand,
materials, of course.
right. But on the other hand, our consortium membership has grown, and so those numbers have probably grown as well. So, but I think it's a general slight trend down in delivery.
Great. Any other questions for Mark? Well, thank you very much, Mark. Very interesting. Next is the report from the State Library.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I have just a few things I think that need to be mentioned and brought to everyone's attention. School library grant announcements will be forthcoming quite shortly from our office. We have a few grant applications to review, but those were finished or they were submitted to our office on October 15th, so we will be anxious to get the word out to school libraries and get those payments processed to everyone. Regarding future grant applications, deadlines January 15, a reminder for public library per capita, and also the Live and Learn construction grant program. Another announcement, which I did share a bit yesterday with the Illinois Library Association Executive Board, is most people are aware the Secretary of State's office did receive a $50 million appropriation for public library construction, again, similar to what we received back in 2009 and began implementation of in 2013. Part of that process, because of the bond money, we had to await release of the bonded funding to our office before we started beginning work with libraries that who remain as carryover projects from the original round of applicants to our office, and then those libraries which did just recently submit applications this past April in anticipation of future funding for those. We have now received that release, and we will be reaching out to those libraries, the two that especially that remain as carryover projects, and then those that did file at least preliminary applications will need to seek further information to assure their continued eligibility to remain on the list and review precisely exactly what they're going to propose in those construction projects. And then, of course, be seeking future applications, again, this April 15th, which is in our administrative role process. So I think that's all very good news, and a very recent turn of events for our office. So we're very pleased to be able to begin that work. And so the two regional library systems will be hearing more about this, and certainly we'll be reaching out to the libraries directly, and maybe even some focused emails to the entire public library community that would be eligible. So I don't have a whole lot other. We're trying to tie up a number of things here before the Thanksgiving holiday, and wish everyone the best for that holiday coming up next week.
Thank you, Greg.
Sure.
Next, we have the statewide database access requests from Deirdre.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted you all to be aware of this. We did, it is in your packet, and first of all, I should say that to be very clear, this is not a request for money for us in any way. It was just a request. This came up as part of the Illinois Library Association discussions at the Public Policy Committee about what kinds of additional funding we wanted to ask for. And so one of the discussion items was access to statewide databases for all system member libraries. Another discussion point was an increase in the per capita grants for public and school libraries. It is my understanding from Diane Foote, ILA Executive Board met yesterday and did vote. If they voted, they indicated there were, their number one priority was the increase in the per capita grants, and their number two were closely followed, as she put it, by the statewide database access proposal. So what I want you to know about it is that, and Greg is very aware of this, we sent this to him as well as to ILA. As I said, we asked for this. We only wrote the proposal. It's for libraries all across the state. It's important, I think, for you all to understand that we are, if not the only state, we are one, it's hard to tell exactly, but we are one of maybe 2 or 3 states that does not provide this. Most states, obviously, in the high 40s have been doing this for years. We did it in Massachusetts, starting back in the early 2000s. And I know, Sylvia, I'm not supposed to talk about Massachusetts when a person from Maine is present, but I know that Maine also had.
Yes, they have a very robust. Yes.
Yep. And I'm sure that Selena could tell us as well. States were
Illinois and, or not, Indiana and Washington.
They both, yes.
Right, and I also worked in other states that had this, like New
Yes.
Mexico and
Yes.
Colorado.
Right. This is not a new original idea. This is an attempt for us to help, for Illinois to help provide access to libraries, especially, for example, school libraries that can't afford any online databases. Also, very, underfunded public libraries, obviously. Generally speaking, it would benefit everybody because you would freeze up local dollars to be spent on other important things like to the minimum wage, for example. So that's what the gist of it is. It goes as a budget request to the Secretary of State, and along with, as I say, the per capita grant and some other items also. I don't know if you want to say anything about it, Greg? Putting you on the spot as I love to do. Sorry.
We've reviewed this internally. We're going to be reviewing this again at the higher executive level in the coming weeks with how this might, what is possible to fit into the Secretary's budget for FY21.
So we'll see what happens, but you're not going to get it if you don't ask. So I just wanted you all. Pardon me?
I think that's a very fair statement. So.
Yes. As we have learned from vast experience. So anyway, I just wanted you all to be aware of it, and I wanted to be sure that nobody thought this was for us. We just wrote this and submitted it on behalf. So, any questions, comments? You can, as you read through this, you'll see that there's a lot of, we've been gathering data. Thank you, Layla, for that, and Grant as well, other people here at Rails. Other state agencies have been very helpful in providing information. There's a whole big process through an RFP process. It's very competitive in terms of if and when, I won't say if, when we get the money, in terms of figuring out what it is that would be the most needed as well as the most affordable. And it would also, this is another way that we could serve the unserved, because could geolocate this for people without library cards or libraries. That's it.
Great. Well, I think this is wonderful. I'm so glad that Rails took the lead to write this and for the state, for all residents of Illinois.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to things we don't need anymore. Disposal of surplus vehicles. Mark, would you like to talk about this?
Well, yeah, thank you. In your package, a memo on vehicles that we would like to dispose of. We've been getting our money's worth out of our vehicles. These vehicles have way over 300,000 miles on them. And we're at a point now where we need to put them out for pasture. And these vehicles are not really worth very much, primarily due to the high miles and other mechanical issues and things like that. So we're asking the board for permission to dispose of these vehicles.
Thank you, Mark. May I have a motion to approve the disposal of these surplus vehicles?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so moved by Dave and seconded by Sarah. Stacy, will you please call roll?
Dave Barry,
Yes.
Michael Campbell,
Yes.
Haley Cox,
Yes.
Selena Gomez Bellos,
Yes.
Gwen Gregory,
Yes.
Percy Harris,
Yes.
Diane Holster,
Yes.
Sarah McCone Chase,
Yes.
Jenna Luisi,
Yes.
Scott Poynton,
Yes.
and Thomas Day.
Yes.
Thank you. Now on to committee appointments, which we already talked about a little bit, but Deirdre?
Yes, Paul just asked me to let you all know that Percy and Jenna have joined the advocacy committee.
Volunteer.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and so
I'm going to
that-
use, can I borrow that?
Yeah. So that's really it.
Great. All right. No unfinished business.
Right.
On to the board development topic with Sylvia Norton, who is the executive director of the American Association of School Librarians. Sylvia, welcome.
Good.
Thank you so much for being here.
I greatly appreciate you having me here today. Both I attended the advocacy meeting this morning and now sitting through a board meeting. I'm a board wonk. So I love, but also just because I'm sadly aware how little I know about Illinois. And you would think I moved here 6 years ago from Maine. That's the accent you're hearing. And I realized how little I know about where anything is in Illinois because ALA is downtown Chicago, and I decided that I needed to be close to work, and I have my little bubble walking to work and back, and it's amazing how little I know about this state. So I appreciate knowing not only where places are in the state, but also the structure that I know what we did in my state. I worked at the state library and at the Department of Ed, in addition to being a high school librarian and other things, and a library trustee and everything that those of us who are into libraries like to do. So I greatly appreciate this opportunity to be here. I was ASL, did trainings for when the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was reauthorized. We had worked very hard for a number of years to get school libraries explicitly mentioned in it, because the previous No Child Left Behind the word never appeared anywhere. I was working for the state of Maine at that time, and when the document first came out, I did this keyword search for anything that had LIBR, any truncation, because it had wonderful things about reading and literacy and the importance of using technology, yet somehow they didn't make the connection to school librarians. So it was really frustrating, and ALA and ASL worked on that for quite a while. And so we really promoted that with state trainings for state plans. Unfortunately, it didn't go as well as we wanted for mandating in those state plans. There was no mandate, but we were trying to get states to include that explicit language also. And we were doing pretty well until administration changed and the guidance of the education department changed. And when that happened, a lot of states that had made some inroads and had people on committees we didn't do as well as we had hoped. But we're still in there. We're still advocating. And so the several ways we do that. One is, I have to tell you that I brought you a highlighter pen from ASL that you should have. But I'm passing around the bag because you need to have, we are known for our Emory boards. So it's really essential to library advocacy, but there are people who come looking for them all the time. But most of all, I passed out to you the ASL Standard Framework for Learners. This is a pamphlet. We have it on our site. I just came from, and I'd like to make this a conversation, but I just kind of want to give you this kind of material that we have. 2 years ago, after a very lengthy process, we launched the National School Library Standards for Learners, school librarians, and school libraries. It's a very purposeful research-based approach that we had working on to integrate those that you can't. We've previously had standards for students, which is the standards for learners that I'll talk about in a minute. And then we also had this other guidelines for what school libraries should have and kinds of things school librarians did, but they were integrated. And, frankly, I don't care how many books and computers you have sitting in a library until you have a librarian there. You're not engaging with the people using those resources. So how to use those resources, the role of the school librarian, we thought was really important. So that was 2 years of conference. This is why I look hungover. Sorry, it's not the bourbon in Louisville. It was the 3,000 people that we had at the conference, which was great. But what was nice about it is that we had a lot of sessions, in addition to some great speakers, but we had a lot of sessions where school librarians brought what they had done with these standards in the last 2 years. So we could practice. And we've had a number of states that are already adopting them or adapting them, depending upon how the state structure goes. Some of that officially through whatever their state statute regulations might be, and some of that has been what is often in many strong school library association that does the work to adapt these national standards to what is standards for their state. So if you just to briefly just look at this in the middle, we have 3 of these, but I'm just going to talk to you about the learner framework because this is the format we use. After a lot of work, and let me tell you, there was a lot involved with 2.5 years of developing these new standards. We came up with 6 what we call shared foundations across the top. This is really, no matter what, the information literacy process. When I go around to talk to about this is what you're already doing. This is information literacy. But we've done several things in looking at this. We've tweaked language to be more reflective of what's happening today, particularly in technology. But we also we're looking at terms that resonate more with educators because our previous guidelines were a lot more written for librarianese. And librarians are wonderful people because I am one, so you should know that. But basically we love acronyms and terms that we use ourselves, and no one else knows why we read books, but this is, and of course, when it comes to libraries, that whole inquiry piece is what we're about. I think that's what, I don't know about you, but that's what attracted me to libraries early on in my life, because I was one of those kids. My father complained I didn't say why. He said, how come this and how come that? Here's where I could take those kinds of questions, and had great librarians who said, oh, okay, so what do you already know about this? And what are your questions? And so maybe we could find some more information. And now that we've found some of those, it was books in those days. Now that you've read the best information here, the curate part, and then create your own knowledge from that and then share it out. So this is really what this is across the top, but particularly you've got, I think, some slightly different emphasis than what was like a 9-step process in some of our previous information literacy standards, because we've really made an emphasis on include, that sense of understanding the inclusiveness, the diversity, having those diverse resources. There's a lot more emphasis in our learning community about EDI, diversity and inclusion, than there used to be. We've definitely made an emphasis on collaborate. For a long time, we've been talking about the way that in libraries to collaborate, and our activities were for, I know you're shaking your head at me, it makes me feel good, to collaborate. But this is also, this career, college, and community, really. I mean, whenever people say, well, libraries, are they relevant today? I'm like, is life relevant? I mean, this is what happens. So the collaborate for work and looking at this, the explore, just have that mindset to, and definitely the engage piece, which is, to me, with my background, I worked a lot with technology coordinators who I love, but they often don't have the same kind of background of librarians looking at the ethical implications about the use of information, intellectual property. We have intellectual freedom where, it's so much more than just doing a bibliographic citation, which I also taught when I was a high school librarian, but I also told them why we did this and talked to them about if they had their own work, why they would want someone else to do it. And so this is what this really is. But also there within, if you just look down the sides, it changes as you look at this and what domain you're in. And so these think, create, share, and grow domains are those aspects of working, more psychological aspects on how you approach this thinking and creating, sharing, and growing. I'm not going to bore you with the whole course on standards, but there are 2 other frameworks, one about the librarian and how they can approach this, and one about the library and the kinds of, I don't want to say stuff, but what has to be kind of present. And we do go beyond the walls of the library, but it's that resources piece and what a library does. And just before that, just because I did talk to what I think is the difference that librarians bring to thinking about learning, is we have the common beliefs on this page. And we've been working with, we have a new initiative working much more closely with the administrators, superintendents and principals particularly, because in school libraries, that's often where the decision makers are. State boards, the state board's important, the school board's important. I've been on a school board, I know, but I also know that those recommendations come from those superintendents and principals. And so, and particularly in site-based management, which a lot of schools have, it's the principal who's handed a pot of money and then has to make some difficult decisions. They know that pot of money, they need a school counselor or a school nurse. And then they've got some left and they say, oh, well, I'd love to have a secretary, or I could have a librarian. And, and I've been, as someone working in other roles, visit principals who said, wow, we have a great librarian. She makes such a difference in our school culture because the library is the center of this school, and the librarian knows every student, because from the time they show up until they leave, every student, every content area connects in the library. But they also know they make difficult decisions. What I love about the administrative work that we've been doing, we held a session at conference, and we had a panel, and I think it was the superintendent who said this, that said, I'm realizing that as when I set priorities, that I need to think about the whole child. And so the library is part of that, thinking about the whole child. So there was some really good budget discussions that I appreciated hearing as we work to advocating for why librarians are still integral. But here, so we think that school libraries are an essential part of our learning community. We talk about having qualified school librarians, that it's nice that you love books, but in a school atmosphere, it's important to bring a more extensive background. We talk about being prepared for college, career, and life, as I said. Reading is still core. I talk a lot about technology, but if you can't read, engage and intellectual freedom, and we have technology, but mostly I think overall it's about, for any of this to happen, you have to have a human being in place to engage the people who are there. So that's what we're about. This is part of this is part of what became our National School Library Standards. It's becoming a textbook in a lot of college courses. We put out a thing that if your professor said this is your textbook, you get a membership. It's worked out pretty well, but mostly I think that it's made people stop and think, and we've had a lot of educators who see this as reflective of the library being part of learning in general. And I don't care what kind of library you are, I think you're about learning. Public libraries are about learning just as much as school libraries are. We just kind of do it in a different way. And we've continued this with each of those shared foundations is coming out with a separate book. So if anybody wants to drill down, they have that. And I'm not trying to sell books. I'm just trying to tell you that we're supporting this. We're continuing. This just came out, so we're continuing it. Also, the leadership aspect of the school librarian. But we also have a standards portal where there are all sorts of downloadable, free, easy to access materials. So we're really, really trying to work nationally to support what's happening at the state level. When Carolyn was just here from ISLE, she's going to be our connection for what we're calling our state level leaders to work with our administrator group so that the materials we're developing for these resonate with administrators, because they don't want to talk to each other. So there's a lot of ongoing pieces where I'm acutely aware we're the National Association, and as a good Yankee, you don't have someone from the outside come in and tell you what to do. Well, I think that's probably true in almost every state, that it's really at state and local level where the influence is. So I really see our role as providing strong resources, deep thinkers, opportunities to get together and talk with other states and share what you're doing, and then go and empower those people to be able to go back to their local state or state location and say, okay, I'm going to influence what's being decided here. So that's I'd love to talk. I'd love to know more about what you're thinking, or anything else you want to know.
Well, we always are talking now, it's about the ever growing, more depressing state of school librarians in Illinois. Would you say that is, I mean, we're losing them constantly. We're losing members. We're losing school libraries as members because we're losing school library paid staff. Is that a national trend? Or
Depends on where you are. We have really strong pockets, and then we have other places. We have a continual, March will be budget season for schools, and we will have a number of people contacting us, and we will write letters, and sometimes they make a difference to support this. 2 years ago, I was exhibiting at the National Principals Conference, and this principal, came around the corner and said, "Oh, here you are. I've been trying to find you," which is not usually what I expect them to say. And he said, "I'm from wherever the state he was from," and he said, "You wrote a letter." And I thought, okay, where's this going? And he said, "My superintendent wanted to cut the school librarians, but as a principal, I knew how valuable this position already was and what we were doing in our school, not only in terms of reading, but just that culture that he was trying to set in his school." But of course, his boss is advocating for something else, he could only speak out so much. But we were contacted and we wrote a letter, and we always ask them to read it at the school board because then it goes on the record rather than.
Right.
And so they did, and the vote decided was to keep the librarian. So sometimes I think a letter doesn't sound like much, but it started a conversation that by the time they had to vote on the budget, they decided to keep those positions. I also just spent a lot of time just talking kind of advocacy 101 to people, which you obviously know because Jen is on the National Policy Corps for ALA, but getting people to it's not about school librarian positions, it's about what students are losing and what teachers are losing, because the school librarian position is very much about working with school librarian, with other teachers, collaborating with them and strengthening and that lesson plan and making and enhancing it so it can be even more effective, because there's more than one way to learn and approach this. I mean, I'm not denying, I'm not Pollyanna by any means on what positions are. I was really disappointed with Chicago because I kept watching the news.
Yes.
And I knew from talking with Nora and I've done with CPS, working with those librarians, that librarians was the third of what they're asking for as far as social workers, nurses, and school librarians. And then I heard school librarians dropping out of the news. And so, but I understand that in some ways. So if emotionally, I can get into, oh my God, these kids need a school nurse, and they need a social worker. But I know, because I know what school librarians can do, that they also need a school librarian. That superintendent who said the whole child. I think any type of library, what I know from having grown up in public libraries, but also it's kind of that safe place.
Yep.
And we don't really acknowledge that in the benchmark of, let's see, did they, what they get on the test? What's the report card? Very few parents ever showed up when I was a high school librarian worried that their kid hadn't passed library, but I was the place where many of those kids were interacting and learning in ways that they couldn't in other places, that they were coming in and getting the kind of support that I was having conversations with teachers because I saw these kids year after year, and in an informal setting. So that kind of soft skill, I think when we have soft skills, that piece of what school librarians to do can be just almost as, I think, as powerful as a social worker in making a difference in a kid's life. I mean, almost every school librarian I know has and I know I do, has at least one story about the kid you made a difference for. So I don't know how we get that across as far as that emotional tug, but somehow I'm hoping that by pointing out the difference we can make in learning, that we can also, and working with these administrators, we can point out the difference that we make just in the child's life and the culture of the school. In some places, DC cut a lot of positions a number of years back. I can remember how devastated they were. And then a few years ago, they had 50 position openings and eagerly seeking anyone, because they came to this realization of, we made a mistake. And we have pockets where they will come and approach us and say, I want to get a good school librarian. How can I attract more librarians? Of course, the cycle on that also is when we had lost a lot of people after the recession, when all libraries were kind of feeling the impact. We had a lot of people who did not go because we didn't think there'd be the jobs. And so when people started to ask for those positions, they'd say, well, there's no one out there. CPS said the same thing to us, but we gave them some information to show that there are people available.
Mm-hmm. Well, so my thought on this is, so I know I've had an experience where, I don't want this to sound too terrible, but so I was a judge I've been a judge at the science fair at a school where they didn't have a librarian or a library, and critiquing some of the research that the students in the science fair did that was not, I didn't think it was that great. And the teacher was not very accepting of that. Like, we don't need someone to teach our students to do that. So it made me think, well, the teachers really don't necessarily always get what librarians would do if they have never even had a
Well,
librarian.
most teach that. I mean, if they didn't have a librarian in their life, they didn't get for their own research that you had to look at quality
Right,
resources.
so what do we, as a profession, or what do we do, how can we help with that? Or,
Do you
as,
have a,
Well, I can speak from my that I'm at now. One of, in addition to speaking with administrators and our boards of trustees and in our higher levels of decision makers at our school, I have found that our teachers were open to hearing more about how I could play a role teaching and their students learning. But I think that the resistance that I felt is that they just don't understand what a professional school librarian, fully qualified school librarian can do. And so I have numerous stories where teachers would come to me just feeling really overwhelmed, like the kids are not, like they don't even know how to put together a research question, or they go and they Google their topic and they take whatever the first hit is. And we know that's how kids are learning.
and this is why Collaborate is one of our shared
Correct.
foundations.
And so when they come, and what I'll say, what I try to do is to push into the classrooms a lot. I like to watch and I like to see how the teaching and learning is happening in my school, and then be in a position to say, here's how I think we can work together. When teachers hear that teach modules, we can collaborate for the benefit of our students. When they hear that, when we get together and we do this session, you go ahead and be the content expert. I'm not going to pretend to be the content expert on what you're trying to teach, but let me be the conduit between your content and learning outcomes for the students. And we work together on particular aspects, and their minds are blown because they just don't understand that that's what a school librarian does. We're not the mavens of the room with books anymore. I mean, not that we ever were, but that's always been the perception.
You forgot the ability to eat bonbons and read a lot of good books.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I did have to say to me one time when I was looking at a Demco catalog, she came in and said, must be nice to look through a magazine all day.
Oh, yeah.
Not at this current school. No, not at all. But so I think a lot of, going back to our advocacy meeting, for those of us who are here and for those of us who weren't, a lot of what I do in terms of advocacy is just to promote the purpose and value of librarianship amongst my peers. And what I tend to do, and this helps with my overall advocacy efforts, is when a teacher has a positive experience in working with me, I say, would you be willing to spread the word about that? Would you be willing to mention that to our head of school? Would you be willing to mention that at your next breakfast and say, hey, Jenna helped me out with this really great thing. I think everyone should go have a meeting with her. So for me, that's how I have to work in my own experience to get the word out. And then when I have those allyships and I have those coalitions, when I need to go make a big ask, I'm not by myself. I have this whole network kids into it too.
So what could Rails, how does that look for Rails though? I mean, maybe you talked about that.
Yeah, and some of that I think comes down to, frankly, you'd think it wouldn't be, but leadership really is core to being a school librarian. I worked on various national exams and leadership is an entry-level expectation for a school librarian.
Indeed.
You're supposed to come in and influence and advocate, and that's expectations. And most educators don't have advocacy in their expectations, but we do. And one of the significant changes we made in standards this time for learners is that the curate piece has always been a librarian thing. I used to be very proud that I was the one who selected those books for that collection development, and that they, had certain criteria. And I don't think I was arrogant, but I knew that I had this expertise. Curate now, we expect school librarians to teach this to everyone, so that students themselves don't look to, librarian up on high, what is the best information? No, they're supposed to develop that ability, because God knows in society today, we need that. because information out there. Since this, we had a lot of information before, but someone usually curated that for us. So you could pick out from among the best information what was best for you. Now you have to do both. You have to pick out good quality, credible information and then pick what is the best, and that's what you're trying to do. That takes a lot of work. People, and what I find interesting is people have an expectation that we all just naturally have that ability, and that's why I'm just constantly saying this is what librarians do. So I think that for them to be able to do that, they have to develop that lead advocacy committee by itself. To me, is getting librarians to have that expectation that they are leaders who can influence others and can advocate for these roles.
It's tough person. We all know this.
Yeah.
Just no wonder it's not something that is always done, because
Well, that's
just trying to keep the door open.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough to do, but I also look upon these standards I see as, because I realize I see being great advocacy by themselves, because if you can get people with best practice out there who are really doing the job the way they're supposed to be, it begins to grow. I worked with a friend early on in my career who said, as she did things like that, it was either she could have the acorn or the oak tree. And she always went for the acorn. Hey, would you be willing to do this work with me? And then,
No.
Yeah, I knew you were that type. So would you be willing to do this with me? And it kind of goes well, and it generates a little bit of it. And suddenly he's turning to you and saying, Jen, librarian could do this. And it grows. So I was always kind of an acorn person. I loved being able to, if you had that confidence, but I certainly didn't early in my career, to march into the administration and say, by the way, this is exactly what we're going to be doing this year, and we're going to have a librarian, and we're going to have, but I could get one person to talk to the next person. Yep. and grow that tree eventually. So sometimes whatever works best for them, but I think that's what I always looked upon, is how can I at least make a little bit of a difference, grow sometime before I die. I'm hoping before I die, we have a new vision. We did a strategic plan this last spring after working this year on it. And so we came up with our vision, which is every school librarian is a leader and every learner has a school librarian. So we're saying everyone needs to be able to engage with a school librarian. That's a pretty big vision, but we're going to keep working at it. Any thoughts, criticisms? I'm having to. I just,
I think this transcends, I agree with everything you're saying, but I think it also includes even, academic librarian, and includes us too.
Mhm.
Right.
As well. Things that you say about just Googling, I see that all the time. And then we do train, we do everything. I get the students that come to me and they're still wikiing and Googling and I think too, maybe it's the lack of draw as far as administration, how well we're supported by the people at the top.
Yeah.
Because as long as I've been at my job, library, we just recently attained faculty status not long ago, but it's like this because we have such change in administrators,
right.
Change in provosts, change in presidents.
Every new administrator, you have to convince them again. Yes.
Next. And it's just, we have no, financial status is just, cancellations are it's terrible. And partly it's because,
and
the students, they're not that many. There's just so many.
Oh, right. I recognize the budget things but I guess I think that's back to that acorn of if that administrator has experienced one librarian, they're much more apt to, when they come to your institution, support what you're doing. And so it's if we can only keep, so sometimes we are our worst enemies. The other thing, in talking to academic librarians, there's a little bit of research out there, not much too, but over and over, particularly community college librarians I hear it from, they can tell who's a librarian and who hasn't. Very evident. And that, I mean, you know, that translates into the kinds of projects that professors are seeing. But then we're back, however, to the ones that go, yep, that looks good. I can remember, because I've been around a long time, when we first were getting into the internet and browsers, and standard teacher who thought, telling the student, oh, that's great, that's great. And I looked down at this website that a fourth grader had designed, so like, okay, that my high school student was going to use as the source for doing this project. And thought, okay, how am I going to tell this teacher, let's look at something else while we're here. And then have a conversation about that this is not the kind of resource. But then again, these were the same, we are still, despite how long we've been doing this, I think we're still wowed by the technology. And the first thing that's pop up are still our list. But I can remember when PowerPoints where I was using PowerPoints with students and teachers giving A's to the kids who knew how to bring these things in from the side, the bells and whistle, but the content had nothing. But they go, wow, they did a great job with that. So you only wanted to teach them PowerPoint, or did you want them to actually? So I don't know how we get that across sometimes.
This might sound strange, but I had a student who came, students who are looking for specific articles on diseases, but in hard copy. We no longer have hard copy.
That's hard too.
Mostly online, unless we have the ancient ones that we've had a zillion years that haven't been read.
I don't know what you're hearing. I know I've worked with, part of my job used to be working with architects to approve school library renovations or new school libraries. And it amazed me how many architects would say, well, we don't have to really plan for any shelves because it's reading books, but we don't need any of that nonfiction stuff anymore, And then I'd say, so how about if we think about them as informational texts, but even so, they'd so we can just one little, but I think it's translates. I think, did you cite that on this one, or was I at another meeting? Sorry, where someone talked that, teens are looking for print. And our brains learn differently in print.
Yeah,
so
I prefer print.
When it comes to, and I'm not advocating for one or the other, I'm just saying I'm agnostic on format. Let's work with those. But I'm glad to know that even academics are not finding it always an easy road. And not that I'm glad, but I wish you weren't. But
I think I understand what you meant when you were talking about the architect saying reading book, but can we all just appreciate for a moment how ridiculous
good for you, yes.
as opposed to
Yeah. Is there a book that isn't reading?
that's not for reading.
Of course, that also makes me wonder, so in your life, you've never read anything nonfiction? Yeah.
I think what I hear from students a lot, especially from my 12th graders when I do that, and I can't remember if I said it to the whole group or to just the advocacy meeting, but I meet with our 12th graders at the end of just before they're going to graduate and talk about college level research and the research process. And one thing that they tell me when I ask them where we have fallen short for them in terms of research, because I ask for how I improve my process. They say that they find that their teachers are more focused on the products that they're creating than the processes that they undergo in creating the product. And they feel like one of the reasons that they have not acquired better research skills is because the teacher will say, you gotta have 30 note cards. But they don't talk to them about the product cards. It's the 30 note cards. And so they Google it, and whatever the top 30 results are is what goes on the note cards. And I asked them, I said, who does the note cards just to get the note cards done, and who does their note cards as a means
I did too.
to create their project? And what they tell me is, I wish that the final product had been de-emphasized, and that the process of my creating that artifact had been a bigger part of the picture.
Well, that's also one of my complaints about education in general, is that we're not
focus on the learning, we focus on the process.
Right. And we don't let people, you don't have a chance to take a risk and fail.
Right.
Well, I think this also ties back into the earlier proposal for the statewide database, is that this is a very serious equity issue for
Yeah.
the people in the schools in Illinois, fair educational treatment.
Thank you for
Yeah.
raising it that way, because I think that's a really sensitive concern that we need to acknowledge.
In my state, I was involved with that in my state. We've had, in my home state, did a long time. And as a high school librarian, there's no state hadn't invested in it together.
Mhm.
So that power of the many is pretty, makes a big difference.
Right, and I feel like part of the point of having public education is to encourage equity, and by not to students, that's just hamstringing that whole concept of why do we have public schools in the first place.
Yeah.
So this was great for us to all think about this. Like, I don't personally think about school libraries all the time, so it's great to be reminded.
That's
And
my job.
these standards are
I'm
really
going to.
wonderful. Thanks for sharing this.
Well, if you have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to, email me. I'm more than happy to do anything for you. And there are other people in my members and organizations who could address maybe some of the other aspects. But I appreciate you listening to me.
Yes, thanks.
And don't forget to use your Emery board and pen.
So any other final thoughts or questions? Okay.
Good. I'd love to get what I really would love to get going is a library approach together, so that we were really talking about, because really, there's a difference between of 3 months between my student and your student.
Right.
They leave us in June, September, there they are. So
That's something we could think about.
Well, and that's another thing, having the statewide databases, then the students would have, like, they go to college in the state, they still have the same electronic resources, at least some of them.
Especially if a database like JSTOR ended up being included,
Mhm.
because that sort of database has such wide appeal
Yeah.
and so much use. It's already very familiar to a majority, I think, of college students. But
yeah, such a difference in those sources too, between the Google search and the,
And the
not that you
JSTOR.
can't find scholarly works or whatever on Google, but still.
Great, well, that sounds like a fertile area for working together.
Yep.
I'd like to share what's happening at their library in the Rails board member reports section.
So we don't always do I don't think that we've traditionally done programming that we knew things were coming up on a schedule of some sort and we were actually developing it. So we're having Tuba Christmas. It's part of our artistry and research series. Artistry and research is one of our value statements for the university. So our plan is to start having faculty come and basically talk about what they do, but in terms that are not necessarily as academic as they would be otherwise. So for a more general, our first of the series is going to be Tuba Christmas. So we have the tuba and I guess the euphonium coming in on December 3rd, and they're going to play whatever Tuba Christmas is, and I'm really excited about that.
That's great.
Well, so at the University of Illinois, opening up our digital scholarship hub, which I just have the announcement here, where we are now having a digital humanities initiative and a lab with equipment and people that work there to foster digital humanities work on campus. And so that's a new initiative for us. That's 6 months we've been working on setting it up, and now it's actually going to be taking place.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say my library, the White Oak Library District, we do a lot of large events, and then we do a lot of much smaller, low-key things, Halloween open house sort of thing at our libraries, and invite parents to, on a day other than Halloween, dress them up in their costumes and get a second use out of that costume, come in and, have a fun time. Well, we apparently have struck a chord because 50 people show up in a 3-hour window.
Doesn't
So,
like success.
Yeah, we have a few staff members in that particular branch that are really into Halloween, and they created like a haunted house out of our largest meeting room. They did this last year, and we had like 300 people show up, and then this year it was 850. So now we're like, what the hell now? Like, what are we gonna do? So apparently we're in the Halloween business now, and next year we'll be even bigger and better, maybe. But,
The major industry, that Halloween
yeah,
business.
it's fun to see the community get that excited about something that we just thought was like, oh, ho hum, we'll do this thing again, and wow, it exploded. So
Yeah.
we need more parking lot is what we need. And more parking lot and more meeting room space.
December 11th, John Richmond, our director, is retiring. We're having a going away party. His 18 years, so, and we will be having a director come on board. Actually Monday.
Oh, who is it?
Trained. Melissa Sierra is coming. She wanted to come back home. She sort of wasn't happy about the middle of winter.
Oh, boy, yeah.
But yeah, she's originally from Peoria. She was in Austin. And
Great. Congrats.
And one thing that Waukegan Library has been known for is its quality of partnerships and the types of partnerships it's developed over the years. Excuse me. Just as an example, we have a new brewery in town just across the street from us. They are doing 25 cents of every beer, and they just gave us their first check of $600 and something, and they opened a month and a half ago.
Wow.
So it's on their menu. So they do.
Oh,
So
that's
now,
so
so
great.
now we're
Great.
doing. I have a whole bunch of new staff in one department. So now that staff is. Last night they had their second trivia night at the brewery.
That's great.
So where should I go that I could say that I'm promoting libraries?
Nightshades and Dark at Pandemonium Brewery. So right across the street from the Bradbury statue. You can't miss it. Right downtown. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm going to be on the panel. There's 3 of them, but I'm going to be on the panel on December Municipal Ideas Exchange at Oakton Community College. I'll be talking about partnering in the census with municipal entities, and then I'll be doing a short presentation on the things that we've already developed to show people what we've been doing. But there are 2 others. One is on December 2nd at the State College, and it is free. So if anybody wanted to sign up for that, that's through the Mayor's Caucus. So I just want to.
I think somebody, must be Amy, is moderating that panel on December 2nd.
On December, yeah, I wasn't sure if other
yeah.
libraries are involved in the other ones,
Yeah.
but I think I'm one of 4 on the
Pretty
panel
sure.
on the.
Right now, we're gearing up, because after Thanksgiving, we'll be open 24/7.
Wow, it's so
And
great.
we're gearing up also to get food for finals week for study snacks to feed everybody. Starving children.
How do you pick who gets to work all night long?
Well, I'm the last reference librarian there, so I leave around 9:30, and then the staff stays there. I mean, we stay open until 3:30 in the morning anyway.
Oh,
So.
wow.
3 or 4 hours.
That's really
You know?
well. The world doesn't work 9 to 5 too.
No, I know.
Is there's group study that goes on and 4 in the morning.
They should be in bed and they should be doing their papers earlier. Right, Gwen?
Finals also, and part of our library is open from 6:30 to 2:30 all the time anyhow. So, I mean, we have a lot of commuter students who just come and they stay during finals and they just don't leave campus.
That's a good idea.
Blankets.
Any other things happening in people's libraries?
Not necessarily happening in my library specifically, but in my life, I wanted to share something exciting. So I'm working on my PhD in Library and Information Science at Dominican University. I'm studying school library impact, particularly our International School Library Fellows. And I found out earlier this week that I've been accepted to the iConference 2020 Doctoral Colloquium. So I'll be taking my show on the road to Bora, Sweden in March
Ooh,
to
nice.
talk about my research. Thank you. And to learn from other scholars and other resources. Especially given the topic of our conversation today. Hoping to be able to add to the scholarly discourse on next steps we can take.
We need more information on impact.
Yes.
That will certainly help. Yeah.
We just had our 21st annual family reading night with the judges, you know, in conjunction with Illinois State Library Family Reading Night. And it's just,
cool.
it's always so much fun. The kids just get such a kick out of seeing the judges in their PJs. Yeah. And they,
You
having kids this year.
That's what I meant, judges.
Oh, judges, we limit it to 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because otherwise the kids get really bored. They can only handle so many stories before the natives get restless, as most of you know. And then we give them a tour of a courtroom, and they all get to sit in the judge's chair. And so it was fun. Wow, how do you guys do it? I do not know.
Definitely the hardest job.
I agree.
Definitely.
Except most patrons don't come in and go, oh, the librarian didn't want to hug you.
That's true.
That's true. That's true.
Building for our next board meeting. There is no Rails board meeting in December, so don't show
Don't
up
come
here.
I mean, you can come here, but there won't be a meeting.
Yeah, there won't be any lunch. So our next meeting is Friday, January 17th, here in Burr Ridge. Include plan progress report, the executive director goals progress report, and the quarterly consortia reports. Is there any other urgent agenda items that we need to add?
Not that we know of at this point.
Okay. Maybe there'll be updates on other things.
Yes.
At this time, we can adjourn the meeting at 2:47 p.m. Do we have to have a motion for that? No. Okay, all right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Gwen.
You.